A quorum being present, this town meeting is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can get right into it. Business under Article 7. Dr. Melichewski.
Is that a little? All right, we'll try that again. Good evening, town meeting members. It's nice to see you all. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Tom Milcheski, and I'm the superintendent of schools. I know traditionally the fall town meeting will start with a state of the schools update from the superintendent. We did a little bit differently this year. You should have received an email on Tuesday that had a community report in it. The community report outlines some of the goals, progress, accomplishments of the district in the past year. That will also be mailed to all Reading residents within the next few weeks. As you review that, if you just have any questions, concerns, feedback on just what's happening in the schools, I think myself or any member of our team would love to hear from you. So as you review that, would love to hear your feedback. So jump right in. Tonight, I'm going to start and open up our presentation around Killam. As you'll see, I'll be joined by many other members of both the school side, the town side, to speak to the potential Killam project. So to start, we're going to frame the presentation tonight just through the questions that we've heard from the community over the past couple of years as we started to kick off exploring the possibility of either a renovation or a build of Killam. So see the questions up here first. We're going to tonight talk about why is Reading considering repair, addition or renovation, or replacement of Killam Elementary School. What is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or MSBA, its process and timeline for supporting school building projects? What does a yes vote for Article 7 accomplish? What are the implications to Reading's other elementary schools if Killam were to be renovated or rebuilt? Also, if Killam were to be rebuilt, what is the estimated cost for the project and how would the community pay for it? What could be the impact on Reading's taxpayers to support a new Killam school building? How will the community be engaged throughout the process? And then lastly, just a group of questions that we've heard over the past couple of weeks from town meeting members directly that we want to address. I'd just like to thank those in the community who have shared their feedback and their questions already through various ways to engage in this process, which helped us to shape this presentation. So while I know that the potential of looking at the Killam build or redesign or rebuild has started years ago and has been in conversations with the community for a long time, we tonight wanted to highlight a couple of key milestones from the past few years. First, in November 2020, when the elementary school's master planning report was presented to the community, primarily to look at what was potentially concerns around spacing due to some just programmatic needs and also enrollment, which ultimately, as you know, in that report landed on as the Killam site as a potential location for a new building. In June of 2021, we submitted the Killam Elementary School Statement of Interest to the MSBA, and then we're thrilled to find out in February of 2022 that the Killam Elementary School project was invited into MSBA Phase 1 prep period, and then obviously we're here tonight for town meeting approval to advance into MSBA Phase 2 scope definition. So I'm going to provide a high-level overview of just why is a renovation or rebuild of Killam needed, and I'm going to invite some other members of our team to dive into more detail on this too. And I also know that many members of the town meeting have also had the chance to come to some of our public engagement sessions, and also many of you had the chance to come and take a tour of Killam as we held 3 tours over the past couple of weeks. So first, I think we think it comes down to 2 core factors here. One, both physical plant and programmatic deficiencies, and we believe both are extensive. We know that there has been conversations around sort of enrollment, and enrollment is not the key driver in this conversation. Again, it is our concerns with the deficiencies in the physical plant, which we'll get into in a little bit, and also some of the concerns around just the programmatic needs, both at Killam and across the district. So as you likely know, the construction of Killam Elementary School was completed in 1969, and since that time, there's been no major renovations on the building. That's the only elementary school building that has not undergone either a new build or major renovations in that time period. This also gives me the chance just to thank our facilities team. I think one thing that I've learned in quick time is our facilities team does an amazing job in keeping our buildings, and I can speak, particularly our schools, in amazing conditions. So this need for Killam is not stemming from sort of any negligence on that part, and actually quite the opposite. We feel as a team that our facilities department has really helped extend the life of the school and done an amazing job in keeping it in great condition, and also keeping it in condition to now where our students are still in the school sort of learning in a healthy and safe learning environment. So as we'll talk about tonight, we know that through this process it's possible. A possible outcome is to lead towards a renovation, but also at the same time, we acknowledge that a new building is more likely. Primarily for what you see is the fourth bullet there, any significant renovation would reach a threshold of 20% or more of the building's assessed value, would trigger compliance requirements grandfathered in, particularly like ADA, some work in fire, and things like that, which we'll speak to tonight too. So. Overall, we believe that there's just tonight we're presenting on just needs within the physical plant, needs within programmatic, and also what we believe is also paired with an opportunity given the potential commitment of funding from MSBA as well. So I'd like to invite up Joe Huggins, Chief Clark, Chief Burns, and Principal Levesque, who are going to speak a little bit about the physical plant deficiencies, and then we're going to speak a little bit about some of the programmatic deficiencies as well.
Okay. Which order are we going in? Okay, fine.
Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Killam Elementary School. It's important for everybody to understand that the Killam has always been maintained on the capital plan, and still is. And we still go through an extensive preventive maintenance program on that building, just like all the other schools within the town of Reading. Like Tom said, there hasn't been any major renovation of the Killam School done since it was built in 1969. Rather, a lot of smaller projects, mechanical, roof projects, some window projects, try to keep the building as energy efficient as possible. But we do have some physical plant issues. One of the biggest ones is the lead in the drinking water. We have a LCCA plan that's filed by the Public Works Water Department that is in charge of monitoring all the school buildings, and the content in the piping at the school requires us to provide water bubblers around the whole entire facility. So that's really not a great thing. There's a cost that comes along with that. ADA compliance is another issue over at the Killam School. Site entry is one of them. Bathrooms, door widths, accessing the facilities can be very challenging over there. There are some classrooms over there that Sarah will talk about that there's one classroom in particular that you have to cross from one room into the other while learning is going on, which is not an opportune situation. The electrical system is original to 1969. We have had it checked to make sure it can do a reset, but the panels are completely full. So expansion at that location is very difficult, as well as from a technology standpoint over there. Greg is going to talk about the fire suppression and the fire alarm system. We do have a fire alarm, obviously a fire alarm system. It's addressable, but with the code changes, we're going to also talk about what that would look like if a new school was built. There have been, like I mentioned, some window projects that have happened. We took part in the accelerated repair program through the MSBA back in 2009 it was, and we did replace the roof on the building, and we replaced some clear story windows over there. But the majority of the Killam School, 80% of the windows in that building are single pane, which is not energy efficient either. And we do have some water infiltration around the building. It has a lot to do with grading, and it has a lot to do with doors at ground level and some settling that's also going on. We have some areas in the building that have settled, which you would expect from a building of its age. I'll let the two chiefs talk about the security and the fire alarm.
Chief Clark.
Thank you. First off, I'm not going to say that Killam School is unsafe. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not criticizing the staff. The staff there do a great job of mitigating people coming and going to that school. They've done a wonderful job with keeping an eye on it. But the way Killam is designed is the office, when you first come in, is a little bit off to the right. In the right door, they do see people coming and going. The problem is the door off to the left, even though they try to avoid using that, there's a potential that that door could be, somebody could be let in from that door and go right down into the building without anybody in the staff seeing. All the other schools have been updated. New schools are designed to filter people through into the office so they can be checked in, checked out, and be aware of who's coming and going from the building. Again, the staff does a wonderful job of doing that, but there's a potential that somebody could go in that far door off to the left, not knowing that somebody is in the building, walking around the building, and that's an issue as far as sight lines go for the building. That is a safety concern where the newer school or an updated school would avoid that happening. Again, not to say the school's unsafe, that's what I'm trying to say, but it would, hopefully a better design would limit possibility for somebody coming in and walking around.
Chief Burns?
Thank you. Good evening, town meeting members. So I agree with Chief Clark that the building's not unsafe, but it does lack fire protection features that would be required if the building was renovated today or built new today. One of the requirements would be a sprinkler system. A fire sprinkler system is very important for life safety. It limits the fire right to that area of origin, prevents the spread, lets people get out of the building. The other thing operationally for a school building, the amount of paper that can be decorating on the walls of a classroom is limited in a building that is not sprinkled. It's limited to 20%. If it's sprinkled, it can be 50%. And we've all been into elementary school classrooms with all the work up on the walls. It's really limited in a non-sprinkled building. With a modern building, there's more compartmentization to limit smoke spread. Some of the doors don't have door closers on it that would compartmentalize certain areas of the building. The stage depending on the size of the stage, could be required to have safety systems, such as smoke ventilation, things like that. A new fire alarm system would have increased coverage in the building. There'd be carbon monoxide protection. There's limited carbon monoxide protection in there now. And it would have better locations for the pull stations. One of the big improvements for the students would be the sound and visual notifications would be better for the students. And the other thing what I always like to see is the fire alarm panel in the office with the principal so they can monitor what the status is of that. So, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. If we could go to the next slide. One more? Perfect, thank you. And we'll go back in just a minute to look at some pictures. So it was wonderful to see so many of you that were able to come and see what the school actually looks like. I think sometimes it's challenging when we're talking about something and you don't have a reference point. So hopefully this is giving you a little bit of a picture, but those who walked through hopefully were able to speak more about it. As Dr. Milichewski said, of course we know we have physical deficiencies that we're working through, but I think from an educational standpoint, we're really looking at some programmatic needs that we really need to address, not just for Killam, but if we think about it across the district, the impact this could have to think of a new space and a new re-imaged area. So one of the pieces with Killam is, of course, the age of 1969 when it first opened. That was the era of open concept schools, where if you're familiar with that, it means that there are these wide spaces that are available for some learning and some group collaboration, which in theory sounds really lovely. And at this point in time, because of the size of our school and the needs of small group work and making sure kids have that smaller space to be working, the more confined space, an open concept becomes more of a challenge. We don't have walls around certain areas of our building. We're creating spaces for the kids to work, and kids are constantly walking through there, classes are walking through there. So again, I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute, but for one of those pieces is as we are growing in population with our multilingual learners, the needs of our students from special education perspectives, just those, what it looks like to teach and learn now looks different than it did in 1969. And I think it's important to note that within the school, although it's lovely that it's all one level, it's lovely that you can move around the building, we don't have those spaces available anymore for our students. So what we are doing is converting spaces that were originally closets in our school. Now these are not your walk-in closets that you're thinking of in your home. They are of large enough size that we are able to fit tables in there and create a homey atmosphere, but these were not the intentions of it. So we are converting old custodial closets that had sinks in it and different shelving units into these shared spaces. We've also had to create a media center over the past 7 years. So our library is at the heart of the building. You have to walk through the library to get anywhere in the school, and that is completely open. So as children are learning coding and different technology pieces without having a proper space for them, they are watching about 400 plus kids walk through there at any given time. So you can imagine how distracting that is for them as they're trying to learn. So again, Facilities has been really helpful with that and helped us create some spaces. And the other piece is that many of our classroom spaces, as Joe mentioned and Dr. Milichewski mentioned, are not ADA compliant. So these areas that our kids are going into, what we call the high definition areas, or these open spaces that are in the middle of our kind of shared classroom spaces. If you think of a perimeter, are filled with the classroom, and the middle area is that wide open space. That is not accessible for anyone who has handicap needs or anything related to that, so it's all stair-based. That's the same thing with our stage area. So at this point, we don't have a handicap accessible stage area for any performances or anything that we're doing in there. I think the final piece to really think about is that each time we do this, each time we convert an area that was a closet or kind of take that away, that means we're running into storage challenges. Every time that means we're trying to be creative and think about how can we use certain areas of our shared hallways to do that. We're trying to purchase more materials for that or build things as that's going. That's decreasing the amount of space we have for our kids to move around. It also means that these spaces were not built for the technology that we need now. So some of our classroom spaces that are converted and again are completely approved by the Department of Ed, we are looking at spaces that have 1 to 2 electrical outlets in it, and we're trying to bring in smart boards and laptops for the students to use, and we simply don't have the capacity in those areas to be charging them. So again, you're finding more things out in the open that our kids are having to work through compared to other schools. So I think as we just continue to evolve in what that looks like, the reality is the school was just not built for the learning that we're doing now, and so we are hopeful that by thinking ahead, we can think about where are we going in education, what do we need that to look like, but also currently what do we need to do to make sure that our kids in Killam and the kids that are coming through there are getting the same access as the other students around the district. So if you wouldn't mind going back one, just to show you a little bit more about what this looks like, again, for those of you that walked through, the bathroom area that you're seeing there, we have about half of our classroom spaces have individualized bathrooms in it, but they are extremely small. The doorway is a little over 2 feet to get through, which is not the proper width. And then, of course, there's no, all that is in there is the toilet. There's nowhere to wash your hands right there. You can see at the top some of those windows that Joe mentioned, just they have not been replaced. So we're looking through pieces like that, and they're single paned. To the far, would that be the far right? Yes, that, thank you, that high definition area there, that's the space that I'm speaking about. So around the perimeter are all the classrooms, and in the middle there is an open area where we have converted for learning, and our staff does an amazing job helping our kids with that. But as you can see, it's wide open, so you've got a lot of traffic that's going through, and you can see the stairs that where the students are coming and going, as well as some of the storage spaces and troubles that we're having as we keep kind of taking over what was traditional storage and try to find solutions for that. And then the final picture on the bottom is one of the converted closet areas that are now one of our learning spaces for the kids. So just to see a little bit of what it looks like in this school.
Just go back one slide. I think Principal Vec did a really good job outlining just some of the programmatic needs in Killam. I just also want to take a second too to span out and talk about that district-wide. I think Principal Levesque shared a little bit about just a growing multilingual learner population, which we know last year we had 50 multilingual learners in our buildings. Now we have 58. Trend in more and more seeing more multilingual learners, which obviously is requiring more space. Also seeing just an increase in the complexity of the needs of some of our students with disabilities, which obviously we know has space implications. And then also some of those spaces that Principal Levesque was speaking about around having the need for tier 2 support. So interventions for our general ed students in reading, writing, math. Right now, some of those spaces are taking place in some of those high-def areas where there's a lot of traffic, hallways, things like that, where we're trying to be really creative. Tonight we'll talk a little bit later about potential implications for easing some of those spacing concerns due to programmatic needs in our other buildings through a build, but just also wanted to just make sure that we had the chance to share that we're seeing some of those other sort of pinch points too in some of our other schools around just some of the spaces needed to support our students effectively around teaching and learning. So we can move forward. I'm going to turn it over to our school committee chair, Sean Brandt, to walk us through the next phase of the presentation.
Mr. Brandt.
We can all get it. Just keep people in. Yeah, just
Eventually, you won't be able to stand there if we stay behind you.
sit on your shoulder or something.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, town meeting members, for considering this important article. So I want to speak tonight a little bit about what the MSBA is, what that process looks like, where we are in the process, as well as how the vote that you'll take tonight fits into that process. So the MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It was created by an act of the legislature back in 2004 to reform the prior system, which had resulted in a backlog of hundreds of schools that were sort of awaiting funding support from the state. The MSBA essentially was created to support localities, communities, when they had these expensive school building projects that are difficult for many communities to take on their own. They have a real focus on creating affordable, sustainable, and energy-efficient projects in schools. They do that through a continuous engagement process and an oversight of the building process, which I'll give you a bit of a rundown of on the next slide. And then, as I said, they provide reimbursements to communities. They do it based on a predetermined percentage of the eligible costs. So we'll share what eligible costs look like in a few slides here as well. But there's a formula essentially that's derived from a number of factors about the town and about the project itself that dictate what that percentage of eligible costs would be. They've allocated about $16 billion in payments to cities, towns, and regional school districts since being formulated in 2004, and they're funded by a dedicated revenue stream of 1 penny from our sales tax. In the italics at the bottom, I think this is important to note that the MSBA process is a competitive process, right? This isn't a by right. If you have a school project, you're automatically sort of considered. 58 statements of interest were submitted in 2021, which was the year that we submitted ours, and only 11 of those projects were accepted for even consideration for entry into the phase that we're in today. So this is, again, a very competitive process. We were among the fewer than 20% of applying districts that were actually accepted into the eligibility phase where we are today. So here's a rundown of what the process looks like as a whole. I mentioned at the top there, you see submitting a statement of interest. As Dr. Milichewski said, we submitted our statement of interest back in June of 2021. Everywhere on this chart where you see a block of people, that's a checkpoint where the MSBA Board of Directors has to make a decision to move forward or not with the project. And so the first one that you see at the upper left was them accepting our statement of interest and inviting us into the preparation phase. Preparation phase is the first of 3 phases that are defined by the MSBA: preparation, scope definition, and scope monitoring. Since being accepted into the preparation phase, the eligibility period earlier this year, the team's been hard at work sort of getting us through the steps that you see in Module 1, the eligibility period. So the initial compliance certification was about us essentially certifying that we're in compliance today and we'll strive to remain in compliance with all the requirements of the MSBA process, which we certainly did. Formulating the school building committee, which we'll talk a bit more about later. Submitting an educational profile, as well as working through the enrollment process and the enrollment methodology with the MSBA happened over the summer and into the early fall. And then the piece that I think we're approaching the finish line on is the maintenance and capital planning documents. Joe Huggins was here earlier talking about how well maintained the building is. One of the things the MSBA really wants to see before they give us tens of millions of dollars is that we're a town that takes care of our buildings, that invests in them, that makes them last for the long haul. And I think we're certainly on good footing as far as that goes. And then the last step you see in Module 1 is really why we're here tonight. The MSBA explicitly requires local authorization of funding to move into the scope definition phase, right? And in fact, the language in the warrant article you see tonight is prescribed by the MSBA. It's been reviewed and approved by town council as well. But the MSBA very specifically prescribes what that language has to look like. And it has to come either in the form of a town meeting warrant article or a town-wide vote, which is part of the reason why tonight's vote is so important. It's actually required for us to move on to the next MSBA board meeting and be considered to progress into the scope definition phase. Carla's going to come up in a few moments and talk a little bit more about what the $2.2 million that the warrant article asks for will get for us, but essentially it is that scope definition phase. So it's the ability to form a project team, hiring an owner's project manager and a designer, conducting the feasibility study where we were really understand in great detail what are the needs of this building and what is it going to solve for, what is that end state for us. The schematic design work, which is design that is detailed enough that we can do budget, scope, and timeline. And then ultimately, the final phase, or the final module, I should say, of the scope definition phase would be reaching a funding agreement with the MSBA, a town-wide vote for a debt exclusion, which would allow us to move into the construction phase, scope monitoring there at the end. Go to the next slide. So from a timeline perspective, we've already completed the majority of the eligibility period. So as you can see here, our eligibility period ends on February 23rd of 2023. If the vote were to pass tonight, we've completed, I think, all of those requirements except for the final submission of the maintenance documents, which we expect to happen over the next week or two. Once that's completed, likely in the March or April timeframe, we'll go before the MSBA Board of Directors for them to consider, again, advancing us to the scope definition phase. And what you see here in terms of these timelines, 150 days, 300 days, 75, and 90, these are the maximum allowable timelines for each of these modules by the MSBA rules. We certainly don't have to and don't expect and certainly hope we don't take that long for each of these different modules. But it's not a quick process, right? There are meaningful checkpoints along the way. The MSBA has a number of stage gates that we have to go through where they'll have to approve, for instance, the feasibility study. They'll have to approve the schematic design. They'll have to approve their end of the project funding agreement. So there's a lot of leeway, I would say, built into these timelines to allow for the fact that there are processes and stage gates that we'll have to get through at each phase of the project. But again, we can't commit to a particular timeline right now. We're talking, several years out still before we have a functional building, even if everything goes sort of as quickly as possible. And then finally, what does your vote tonight actually do? So as I mentioned, by getting accepted in the eligibility process, the door is open for us to get tens of millions of dollars of financial support from the MSBA for either a renovation or rebuild. The request tonight would allow us to, again with MSBA approval, would allow us to move forward into that second phase of scope definition, where we'll form the project team, conduct the feasibility study, create that schematic design. As Dr. Milichewski alluded to earlier, while most folks who are close to this project think that a rebuild, a new building is the most likely outcome, the MSBA process does consider the possibility of a renovation and what that would look like. So that will be part of the feasibility study to understand whether that's sort of the right solution. Again, whether or not that's likely is another question, but it is definitely part of the feasibility study. And so just to sum up, again, a yes vote tonight from town meeting will advance us into that phase 2 scope definition. And most importantly, and the reason that it's such a critical part of the process, is the MSBA is looking for a validation from the town that this is a project that is likely to be supported when it gets to the end of the road. They've got limited dollars that they can allocate to dozens of projects that are in the hopper at any given time. And getting that local authorization that would come from this vote tonight really is that vote of confidence to the MSBA that Reading is ready to support this project. So I will ask Mrs. Nazaro to come up and talk a little bit about specifically what the $2.2 million gets for us.
Thank you. Ms. Nazaro?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thanks, Sean. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the scope definition, and I get to talk about the money piece of it, the $2.2 million, and what that's going to get for us. Excuse me. One of the things that we will do is we'll hire an OPM, an owner's project manager. That person is going to provide the town with oversight. They'll be an objective person. They will keep the town's best interest in mind throughout this process. That person is going to play a critical role in the success of our project. We will secure a designer. This designer is going to come up with a specific solution for us. We saw the GNAP studies that were done in the past that came up with schemes A through H. We are going to, by the time we get out of the scope definition phase, we are going to have one solid plan that will work for us, and I'll talk about that in more detail. By the end of this process, we will advance our understanding of the needs of our community and of our site. We're going to be doing a lot of detailed analysis on the site and on the area around the site. If there is one thing that we will learn or have learned by talking to other communities as this scope definition phase and this $2.2 million is we have to get it right, right? If we invest in this piece of it, which the MSBA really specifically tells us what we have to do, it has to be thorough and it has to be comprehensive because it's going to determine our total project costs, which is really the number everybody wants to know, and unfortunately we won't know that until the end of this scope phase. The good news is that this funding piece, this $2.2 million, is part of MSBA's reimbursement if we continue with the process. So we won't be eating that whole chunk. Next one, please. Phase 2, so what does that $2.2 million get us? So it's going to incorporate the designer's fees. When we get out of this, and I'll talk about the schematic design later, we will have an idea of what the project will look like. Those design plans will be about 30% complete, right? So there'll be other opportunities after that for that design to be more robust. There's going to be quite a bit of testing done to the site and the area around the site. So geotechnical, geo-environmental. They'll look at the hazardous material possibilities on the site. They'll do a lot of digging. There'll be a site survey. We'll look at wetlands and see if there's any impact there. Traffic study around the site. So that total cost of just that survey, that site work, is going to be about $500,000, $515,000. The OPM fee is included in that as well. You'll see a lot of contingencies here. There's estimated contingencies of unforeseen conditions, which is 20% is fairly typical for construction projects. Market condition contingencies, we all know about if you've done any building lately or projects, you know what market conditions can do to your price. So the market contingency is at 10% for unforeseen market situations. So the total feasibility study will be $2 million. There's a 10% escalation. That, the way I look at the 10% escalation, it's that year-over-year cost, and it's for potential increases in construction inputs. So for steel, for building materials, for labor, for cement, and things like that. Thank you. One thing, Susan and I, Mrs. Botan and I attended a presentation by the MSBA in Harvard, Mass, because they just had one of their only elementary school go through the MSBA process. And one of the big things I took away from it was that the educational plan drives this process, not the funding. So the funding doesn't drive the process, the educational plan does. The MSBA is very specific with the type of supports they give us to help us work through that educational plan. They will bring in the experts to help us define that, certainly the principal, the teachers in that building, and the central office staff will help define what the programmatic needs are for our project, and that will drive our project. Once that perfect project is put into motion, then we see what our costs are. If we need to deduct from there, we'll deduct from there, but we'll do it in a calculated way that makes sense for us, right? Sometimes you can't have everything you want, so you have to take it away until we have people who are satisfied with it. The owner's project manager is our representative who will present this to the MSBA for approval. Two of the processes that we will go through during this whole thing is the preliminary design program, which is what I spoke about, that educational drive or the educational needs driving it, and the preferred schematic report. Sean had mentioned it, and multiple people have asked us on our tours about, do we need a new building? Will we have, will it be a renovation or will it be an addition? The MSBA will take us through that process because they're not going to pay for a new building if we can satisfy our needs with a renovation. Most likely, we all think that we're going to need a new building, but we will go through that process and see where we end up. And then again, the owner's project manager, and along with the designer, will come up with the schematic design, will define our scope, budget, and the project at that point. Included with that schematic design are narratives for our electrical, plumbing, HVAC, fire suppression systems. So that will be included. And like I said, that schematic design is about 30% complete in terms of construction drawings. And then my last slide is what are the implications for our other schools? So this whole process in this building will definitely benefit Killam, but it will benefit the entire district as well. Some of the things that we will be looking at, and this is another thing we've gotten a lot of questions on so far, is we will be looking at how to address our capacity constraints in other elementary schools, how to mitigate the need for the modular classrooms that we have, which currently house about 170 students throughout the district. We will be looking at our RISE program, right? We'll be looking at the RISE program, which currently has about 103 children in it, to see if we can potentially get it to one location, where right now we have RISE in 3 different locations. We have to, as a district, part of our legal obligations is we have to appropriate the proper spaces for children on special education services. Whatever is in their IEPs, we have to comply with. And our multilingual learners, that's a quickly growing group for us in our community. So having those spaces, again, are important. And then, obviously, the potential for redistricting. So that's something we'll be taking a look at, too. I'm going to pass off the presentation to Susan Botan, who's our Director of Finance and Operations.
Botan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be speaking with you this evening about costs that are eligible and ineligible for MSBA reimbursement, as well as the cost to renovate or rebuild a building by looking at some other comparable communities projects. On the slide behind me, we've outlined the costs that are eligible for reimbursement by the MSBA, and it includes total construction costs up to $360 per square foot. Furnishings, fixtures, equipment, and technology are reimbursed up to the amount of $2,400 per student. Spaces dedicated for special education, as well as our special education preschool spaces and classrooms, are eligible for reimbursement. And then there are eligible site costs that include basic landscaping, excavation, pedestrian walkways, fields for physical education, and in general, site costs are reimbursable up to about 8% of the total building cost. The next slide shares the costs that are ineligible for MSBA reimbursement. construction costs that exceed the $360 allowable expense per square foot, costs in excess of $2,400 of the furnishings, fixtures, equipment, and technology, site costs in excess of 8% of the total building cost, all costs associated with non-hazardous site earthworks, including but not limited to the removal of rock and ledge, legal fees associated with, and legal fees and costs associated with mailing, moving, and temporary classroom space, the owners and construction contingency costs, and costs that are not identified during the scope definition period, specifically through the feasibility study and schematic design, and that's why it's so important for us to be thorough during the feasibility study. On the next slide, we've shared an outline with you. We've compiled the most recent building projects posted on the MSBA website, and we included a link on this slide if some of you would like to go in and review the data that's posted there. These projects meet the following criteria. They're all projects that are current and approved by MSBA during the last year in 2021. These are the most current projects posted. These are the projects that focus only on elementary schools. They're located in eastern Massachusetts within 10 to 40 miles of Reading. They're suburban communities, and they all are within a similar demographic to our community. I wanted to make note of two columns that are slightly shaded. The first column is Peabody, the Welch School. This is an elementary school that underwent renovation. This total project cost was $29.9 million. The project excluded $2.1 million of expenditures. These were ineligible expenditures for reimbursement for a total net cost of $27.8 million. The MSBA reimbursement rate for Peabody for this particular project was 63% for the renovation project, which meant that their total MSBA funding or their total MSBA grant was $17.6 million. I'm going to call your attention to the next column highlighted in blue, and this is Medfield. Medfield's Dale Street School is an elementary school that was that's undergoing renovation, and it has an $81 million project cost. The MSBA allowed or applied a 44.9% reimbursement rate to this community, which revealed a $19 million grant. I wanted to mention that the reimbursement rate includes not only a 31% reimbursement rate that's awarded to all school buildings entering the MSBA project, but additional reimbursement incentives for energy efficiency. And on another slide, I'll go into that in more detail. There's one more data point on this slide that I'd like to point out. And if you look at the line that reads excluded expenditures right above net cost, these excluded expenditures, the $38 million, thank you, Jackie, are expenditures that were not eligible for reimbursement. And for Medfield, it included a number of things. There was a considerable amount of site development. There were 2 athletic fields added to this project. There was an oversized gymnasium built so that it could be used by the community. There were some water mains that needed to be installed, and there was a considerable amount of work done on traffic mitigation because the school building was part of a campus of schools. They also used modular classrooms. If we go back one more slide. Thank you, Jackie. I also wanted to point out for Andover, they had about also $38 million of, $67 million of excluded expenditures. And very much like Medfield, their excluded expenses had to do with a significant amount of ledge blasting, site development, larger than anticipated, larger than planned classrooms. So now on the next slide, these are, as I've shared with you, some examples, and these are very common examples of excluded expenses. They're, in some cases, extraordinary site costs, ledge, contamination, wetland issues, the abatement costs, which are associated with removal of hazardous wastes, temporary spaces such as swing space or temporary trailers, district-wide classrooms, district-wide offices like a central office leadership or superintendent's office, and then program space that's greater than the MSBA standard, large oversized classrooms, large gyms, oversized storage, and spaces beyond what was planned for the project. I am now going to turn it over, I believe, to our town manager, to Sharon Engstrom.
Ms. Engstrom?
Don't break the microphone. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm going to go over what we came up with for estimated costs. It is very early in this process to actually know what this project's going to cost without spending the money for the feasibility study. So based on what we were seeing on the MSBA site and what inflation looks like right now, we decided to go with a very extremely conservative and high estimate of what we think the project cost could be at $120 million. We also went with a low estimate of reimbursement from MSBA at 30%, giving us $84 million of local share, which would be a debt exclusion. And in a later slide, I'll show you an example of what the impact would be to an average home. But basically, we ran these numbers through with our bonding agent, who was able to tell us what this would cost us over 30 years. And essentially, it was just under $5.5 million a year for 30 years, and that it would be $88.43 per $100,000 of value. But at a later slide, I'll give you a little bit more context. Who's doing this? Susan, are you doing this slide? Yeah.
A very brief overview about how this particular project would be funded. Pending approval by the MSBA and the town of Reading, we would receive an MSBA reimbursement. The reimbursement begins at a rate of 31%, and we expect it to go as high as 49%. The schematic design will come into play to determine what our construction costs will be. There are three factors that influence the amount of reimbursement that MSBA would award. These three factors are the community income factor, the community property wealth factor, and both of those data points are provided by the treasurer, the Department of Revenue. And the third category is the community poverty factor, and that is a data point provided by DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. There's a second area of funding that could come our way through the MSBA, and that's related to incentive points, primarily energy efficiency incentive points. For green green school buildings, MSBA awards 2%, and then we'll add up to 2% more related to energy efficient maintenance systems. And then lastly, the balance of the project would be paid for through a debt exclusion, which comes with a majority of voters' approval. And I believe Sharon is going to come up and speak with you about what a debt exclusion is.
Ms. Engstrom?
Thank you. So a debt exclusion is a question that a lot of people will ask. What is the difference between a debt exclusion and an override? A debt exclusion is an addition to your taxes to raise the debt service, the annual debt service for a project, and then it goes away when the debt service, when the project is paid off. Whereas if you did an override, it increases your levy base and it does not go away. So a debt exclusion is considered to be a temporary increase to taxes until the project is paid off. Next slide. So I met with the assessor to try and determine what is an average home in Reading worth and what does an average bill look like. He gave me the numbers of just under $700,000 as an average home, so I wanted to use this as a graphical depiction of what it would look like. One of the things we have in our favor right now is that we have 3 debt exclusions that are about to fall off of the tax bill. 2 of them in fiscal '24 and 1 in fiscal '25. So in fiscal '24, the high school debt exclusion and the Wood End debt exclusion will fall off, and then fiscal '25, the library, just in time for Killam to come on. So that will kind of net some of the effects of this project. So the average tax bill, and we used fiscal '22 tax rates because, well, they're the last certified rate that we have. And just to give you an example, that bill would be $9,313 for that average taxpayer. And then we said to ourselves, well, what does that tax bill look like without those debt exclusions? Because when the time comes, they will be gone. And we saw a savings of $300, so it went down to $9,013. And then the last chart there is showing when we add Killam. Killam would be about a $615 increase to the tax bill, but when you net it with the savings of $300 you see from the projects that we're paying off, the net effect is $315. If you go to the next. So these are the assumptions that were made. We made the assumption of, as I said, a $120 million project with a 30% reimbursement, debt service about just under $5.5 million, and we used a tax rate of fiscal '22. So you can see down below the tax bill, $9,313. Take the exclusions away, there's a $300 savings, and then $9,628 for the average taxpayer. The other thing that you would want to consider is if your house is worth more than $700,000, you'd want to add $88 for each $100,000 that you have.
Mr. Brandt?
Okay, so we talked, wow, this is really hot. So we talked a little bit about, we talked a lot about all the rules and processes that the MSBA has in place. But as Ms. Engstrom just highlighted, you know, under any scenario, the town is left absorbing the bulk of the costs, obviously, with any project that we might do. So how do we continue to stay sort of in charge? How do we continue to sort of lead the building project? The Killam School Building Committee, which was formed probably 3 or 4 months ago at this point, during our preparation phase, is really the group of folks in town who are responsible for guiding this project. There's support from the MSBA. There are checkpoints with the MSBA, as we discussed. But the school building committee really is sort of driving the project along with the OPM and the designer. The town created in the charter the permanent building committee, I don't know, some number of years ago. So we had to thread the needle a little bit to meet both the requirements of the MSBA for what the membership of the school building committee would be, as well as honoring what the charter requires in terms of the permanent building committee's involvement. And so the way that we did that is our school building committee is comprised of the members of the PBC, as well as 2 representatives from the school committee, excuse me, Mrs. Herrick from the select board, and Mr. Talking too fast and I swallowed wrong, sorry. And Mr. Ross from the Finance Committee. The school building committee is also supported by a number of town staff on both the town and school side. Dr. Milichewski, Principal Levesque, we've got a staff member from the Killam School as well, town manager, town accountant, Mr. Huggins, our procurement officer, et cetera. So lots of support from both elected officials, appointed officials, as well as town staff. But the school committee, or the school building committee, really oversees this process of renovating or building the new Killam Elementary School from the planning process through to construction. So the role of the school committee, frankly, from this point forward diminishes a bit. We'll all stay certainly involved, and we'll be stakeholders who, have probably some perspectives on the vision for the new building and the vision for the district and that sort of thing. But the actual execution of the project, the supervision of the project, falls upon the school building committee increasingly from this point forward. In addition to the school building committee, we're also anticipating standing up a visioning committee during the scope definition phase. So sometime probably in the spring is when we'd start to see this pop up. This would be made up of residents from the Killam community as well as the broader town community, town and school staff members, and the purpose of that would be specifically to focus on creating that educational vision for the future state of this building project. So we want to make that a much more inclusive group than the one that's sort of prescribed by the MSBA for the school building committee makeup. How will we engage the community throughout the process? So both of those committees that we just talked about are OML, or, are subject to OML. Those meetings are public meetings that anybody can certainly attend. They'll be publicly posted, as all of our board and commission and committee meetings are. We'll also be proactively asking residents to participate in things like focus groups, surveys, inviting residents to attend public meetings. There are some hearings that will be scheduled along the way. Town boards and committees, including the select board, the school committee, the FinCom, will all have meetings where Killam-related topics are on the agenda. And so, if folks are tracking or paying attention to those committees, you'll have those opportunities as well to provide feedback. The OPM will be responsible for, among other things, creating a website early in the scope definition process where all the documents, the plans, the meeting minutes, and the images of the project and the plans are easily accessible for all residents. And that'll be a site that's likely hosted outside of the readingma.gov site, so it's sort of very easy for folks to get to. And then I'll just highlight as well, just since August of this year, we've had at least 4 public meetings held about this project. So including in September, a public hearing that was posted and noticed. And then, as you all know, as town meeting members, we held 3 tours at the school as well, where you were all invited to come attend. So certainly we've been committed to engaging the public as much as possible in this process, and that won't stop once we move into phase 2. So with that, I think Dr. Milczewski is going to close us out. We're going to stop there, and we will see if anybody actually has any of these questions.
Before we open it to the floor, I would like a Finance Committee report.
Good evening, Mary Ann Downing of the Finance Committee. As part of the report tonight, before I give the vote, Finance Committee Chair Ed Ross asked me to make a few notes to town meeting about the Finance Committee's long consideration of the subject matter of this article prior to town meeting members taking a vote that recommends spending $2.2 million of free cash towards the aforementioned feasibility study for Killam. First of all, FinCom has long been involved over the past couple of years in attending school committee meetings relating to the significant space and other concerns that exist in Reading Public Schools generally, and with the Killam School in particular. The Finance Committee has held 2 financial forums this year, one on September 28, 2002, the other on October 26, 2002, both of which included agenda items discussing at great length the need for the Killam project, the scope of the Killam project, the projected costs of the Killam project, and how financing works for the Killam project, all the information you have all been given this evening. We also have held, as part of our regular meetings, we've gotten regular updates where the town accountant has went over current and projected free cash balances, other expected town needs coming up, and the stated amounts of our long-term debt. For example, on October 19th, when we took our vote, the town accountant had shared with us free cash estimates, even though not yet certified, that showed, as of September 2022, an estimated free cash balance of $19,693,000. As she indicated to you on Monday night, that number is actually even higher, $19,927,000. At our October 19th meeting, she also noted to us that even with the projected expenses that town meeting we've already voted on for Article 4, we're being asked to for Article 7, and what would be coming up with Article 18, that would still leave balances of, at the time in September, we heard 18.72 million, and as of Monday night, it's actually 18.94 million in our free cash, which represents 16.4% of 115.6 million of our budget, which is well, that 16.4% is well above the 7% that is our policy. So based on all of these facts and all of this information, at our meeting on October 19th, 2022, the Finance Committee voted to recommend Article 7 to the town meeting by a vote of 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Do I see any hands? No, none appearing. Are we ready for the vote? Oh, was there a hand? Oh, no. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 8, Mr. Maltese.
Good evening, town members. I will be speaking on Article 8. As you know, we are rebuilding the Auburn Street water tank. The project is under construction at the moment, and we expect for the project to be fully built by July of 2023. As part of the construction process, the town put up a temporary tower that is on the site and is currently hosting three cell phone carriers. With the construction of the new tank, we will be able to host 4 carriers. And in order to incentivize these carriers to go on the tank, we are requesting authorization from town meeting to engage in a very long-term lease. This is not typical, obviously, but these contracts are not typical either. So what we are requesting is that town meeting approve terms up to 20 years. Ahead of this town meeting, we actually went out to bid, and we received 4 responses on which carriers would be going on the water tank. Those responders, and I will read them in order of from highest to lowest, are Dish Wireless, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. So as you all know, we have been getting a lot of complaints about Verizon coverage in particular, and Verizon is not on the temporary tower and was never on the previous water tank. So by having Verizon on the new water tank, we have been told by Verizon that it should greatly increase our cell phone coverage, particularly in the Birch Meadow complex, because you can actually see the water tower from here. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Yes, Ms. O'Neill.
Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. I was just curious, as I've seen the paid legal ad in the Chronicle a couple of times for requests for proposal or providers up at the compost area. So how does that? Do we need additional ones beside what you would receive for the water tower, and how do they work together?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you for the question. So the select board, this is a very important topic for the select board. We issued a request for information. I want to say in August, requesting the carriers to tell us essentially what is needed. Verizon was the only one who came back and said that in addition to the water tank, which is before you today, they would also like 2 additional sites. And one of those sites is the compost center. So because we knew this was going to come up in town meeting, we issued an RFP as well for the compost center. And we opened that RFP this Monday, and we received only one response, and that response is from Verizon Wireless. We just opened it. Obviously, there's a lot of details that have to be flushed out, but we are hopeful that we will be able to negotiate with Verizon on potentially one more site, but that's all to be considered at a later article, not tonight.
Further discussion? Mr. Sasso?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. Just a question on the lease term. Is that intended in, I mean, I know you haven't negotiated anything yet at the moment, but is it intended to be a one-stop 20-year lease, or is it going to be structured? Or what was your perspective on how, to protect ourselves against, changes in technology or any other thing that might come down the pike that might affect the ability for either something to be swapped in and out, or costs that may change, or issues of maintenance that have actually had issues with regards to protecting, the investment we're making in the new water tower. I know that's a mouthful, but just trying to get an idea of what the perspective is on these leases.
Sure. As part of the RFP, we requested an initial lease amount and an annual escalator. There was an initial lease amount and a 4% escalator that would grow annually. On the rest of the questions, I mean, we're actually going to execute legal contracts, and all those details would be hashed out in those contracts.
Okay. So then, just to be clear, just so I understand, so the vote that we'd be taking this evening would be to authorize you to basically go up to, as it said, not to exceed, but up to a 20-year lease, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes. Mr. Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. So Verizon and the carriers, they negotiate dozens and hundreds of leases with towns all across the country. We do it maybe once in a lifetime. What kind of assistance is the town going to get? Are we going to hire a consultant to help us, a lawyer, somebody with a lot of experience in negotiating with the carriers? I just don't want to see us get taken advantage of by someone who does it a lot, and we don't do it at all.
I will defer the question.
Ms. Freed?
Thank you. So our office is helping with the lease. A partner at my law firm named Jenny Merrill, some of you may be familiar with her. She works purely on procurement and contracts and does cell tower leasing all the time. So this is an area of the law that she's very familiar with, and she's been working closely with Fidel as well as Allison Jenkins, Chief Procurement Officer of the town, to make sure that the town is protected.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Horn?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bernie Horn from Precinct 1. Just in terms of this prior question, This may be moot because it's probably it may be covered by other laws, but would it be possible to add to this this motion to make sure that any contracts entered into under this motion be publicly disclosed?
All contracts are public documents.
They are, okay, because I know there was some discussion about prior contracts that couldn't be found and that they weren't available. I'm just wondering how that can be avoided and to make sure that, in fact, this is all available to be publicly disclosed.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak about the past, but all contracts that we sign at the moment, I mean, we transitioned to DocuSign, for example, as a way to kind of make things easier in the future. So the most contracts now are kept electronically, and they are a public record.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Did I see a hand? No. Oh, I'm sorry, here in the middle.
Hi, I'm Pam Gooddale, Precinct 7. I just had a question about the discrepancy between the wording on what's up there and what's in our books. In what we have in front of us says, authorizes the Select Board to execute one or more leases of space on the water tank and surrounding ground space. And the surrounding ground space isn't listed up here, and I was a little concerned about what that meant in terms of surrounding ground space, just because in the past I know there was some discussion of cell towers and so forth, so I just wanted to clear that up.
Sure, yeah. What's in your packet was put in September. I guess I'll say when we went out to print that it had to be posted. The motion is accurate on the screen.
Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 9, Mr. Santaniello.
Well, here's the exciting part of the evening. We're here hopefully to reauthorize Reading's senior discount plan that we've done for the past 6 years. About 7 years ago, town meeting came together and authorized us to engage in another type of form of senior tax relief that was basically invented here in Reading with the help of previous select boards, town manager, and various folks in the community that I consulted with. We come up with a great plan, and we based it on the state senior circuit breaker income tax credit. For folks that qualify for that credit, the rough parameters are they have to be age 65, and their house value can't be more than, I think last year was $884,000. But the main thing is they have to pay at least 10% of their income towards property taxes and half the water and sewer. Last year, the maximum state credit for a circuit breaker was $1,170. Our local plan here in Reading, you have to own and occupy your home for a minimum of 10 years. Any spouse or co-applicant has to be at least age 60. You have to have received the state circuit breaker credit. For those folks that do not earn enough to file income taxes, we go through their taxes to determine whether or not they would have received that credit if they filed, so they may still be eligible to receive our local exemption. And they can have no significant other assets. That means they can't own a second home, they can't own a condo or anything like that because they have means beyond what the intended recipients of the exemption have. And what we do under our current plan is we grant 150% tax relief. So if someone received the max last year, which was $1,170, our local exemption to them was $1,755 off their tax bill, which represents an average of almost 20% off the average single-family tax bill for eligible seniors. Over the past 6 years, my office, my staff, we received so many letters from seniors, and seniors coming into our counter just thanking us for making this available, for recommending this type of tax relief. And they tell us both how meaningful and impactful it is. And it's all the difference that helps them age in place and remain viable and vital contributory members of the Reading community. This reauthorization, as we have to do vis-a-vis a home rule petition every 3 years, each time we've reauthorized this, we've made slight changes to try to keep up with the times. The further we go, we might learn some things new. We learn more about our senior constituency. And this time, the slight change, instead of having a fixed reimbursement at 150%, we are recommending the ability for the Board of Assessors to recommend a reimbursement anywhere from 100 to 150%. Why? There's legislation at the state that may double the amount of the circuit breaker. So, for example, the circuit breaker may go up to $2,400. If we remain at 150%, we could take $3,600 off a senior's tax bill. Sounds great, but the results would be catastrophic because seniors have to pay 10% of their income to get the credit. A lot of seniors wouldn't be able to file the next year or the year after. So their financial situation will go up and down. If they do double it at the state level, we want the ability to do a 100% match, which would still be more than the $1,755 they receive now, while not exposing that many seniors to that up and down that happens. Over the past 6 years, we've been able to help an average of 195 seniors every year through this program. The average cost, because the cost is borne by the rest of the residential tax base in the town, has been about $35 a year. And let's see. Oh, the application timeline. We put reminders in the preliminary tax bills that go out at the end of June. And the application timeline is July and August, August and September, I'm sorry. I don't know why I had July on the brain. August and September at the Board of Assessors office. And there's details to this we put up on the website well in advance of that application timeline. Thank you, and if anyone has any questions.
Do we have a Finance Committee report?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jean Borowski, Precinct 6. At our meeting on October 19th, 2022, the Finance Committee voted 8-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Further discussion? Oh, excuse me, Bylaw Committee. Mr. Struble.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At our meeting of October 11th, 2022, the Bylaw Committee voted 5-0 to recommend the content of this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Yes, right here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sorry. Paula Perry, Precinct 1. This is one of the programs that I'm probably most proud of as a town meeting member. And I love to hear the way we're really adapting to try and make it most advantageous for our seniors. So kudos to us. We should be really proud.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Bill Brown, Precinct 8. First of all, thank all of you for the $35. Victor, does this include the override, or excuse me, the exclusion? Is that 150% of the added exclusion that's going to come, the $600 or whatever it might be?
This is not a valuation-based exemption. It's based on what you receive for a senior circuit breaker.
Okay.
So whatever you receive on your individual tax return for a circuit breaker credit, that's what the match is based off of.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Ms. Binder.
Thank you very much, Angela Binda, Precinct 5. Thank you for that explanation. I supported this originally. I'm going to support it again. I have a question about, you mentioned that there will be a shift to residential homeowners. Will there be any shift to commercial properties, or will the shift away, the shift from seniors, the senior tax break, only be borne by residential property owners?
You should have watched our classification hearing on October 25th.
I watch it every year. I watch it every year, asking for general explanation for everybody.
Since we've enacted this form, this groundbreaking form of senior tax relief, that approximately 50 other communities in the Commonwealth have adopted either this or something similar. I know because they all called us. So what the town has done is, since the adoption of this tax relief, what it creates in a single tax rate community is it creates a higher residential rate and a lower commercial rate. Now, the tax burden should be shared, so in the interest of trying to, keep everything kind of equal with the massive rise in residential real estate values and the relative flat growth in commercial, the select board initially a few years ago adopted a 1.02 split, which resulted in a slightly higher commercial rate than the residential rate. And most recently, at the last meeting, they adopted a split rate of 1.05. So again, that moved the, sorry, I don't have the rates off the top of my head, but it moved the commercial rate a bit higher than previously and the residential rate a bit lower.
So the split tax rate that we have, even though it's split, what it really does is just offset the senior tax break, so that the senior tax break is borne equally by residential and commercial properties. So if we had a single tax rate, this shift would only be going to the residentials and not be borne at all by the commercial.
Yes.
So the split tax rate really just evens it out.
You could say that, yes.
Thank you.
Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 10. Mr. Santanello, I guess it's you again.
Geez, that's right. I have one more article. I was so geared up for senior tax relief. Okay, under Article 10, to accept the provisions of Clause 56 of Section 5 of Chapter 59 of the Mass General Laws, which would authorize the Board of Assessors to grant real and personal property tax abatements up to 100% of the total tax assessed to members of the Massachusetts National Guard and to reservists on active duty in foreign countries. This law has been on the books for a while, and basically what it does, it gives the Board of Assessors authority to grant an abatement for this defined group of folks who may get called up active duty service. This is a funny one. It needs to, once again, it has a sunset clause, so every few years you have to reauthorize it. I've done this for a few years in Wakefield, and basically we try to adopt criteria where if someone's away 6 months of the year, we'll grant perhaps up to 50% of that fiscal year's tax relief. If they're gone for a year and it spans 2 fiscal years, it might be 50% each year, but it's something that they would have to apply for, and they have to provide a copy of orders and service records and what have you. The Board of Assessors could opt to do nothing, but this gives us the ability to do something should they choose. And it's also been recommended, as you may know, I work for a couple of different communities, which means I get to work with some great veteran service officers and other regional officers in that capacity. And they've been recommending towns to adopt this, just to make a more hospitable climate, people who are willing to make these sacrifices for their community and their nation.
Do we have a Finance Committee report on this? No, I didn't think so. Okay, and I assume with is there bylaw, even though it's a state law? Okay, bylaw.
Yes, at our meeting of October 11th, the bylaw committee voted 5-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, Ms. Snowdoxer?
Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. I actually just have a question. So I'm very much in favor of this. I'm just wondering, does it also extend, or is there another law that extends to others in different branches of the military who are also stationed abroad, or is it just our National Guard?
National Guard and reservists under this clause.
Okay, and is there any help for our other?
If they have a minimum of a 10% service-connected disability, there is a real estate exemption all the way up to 100% of disability. And if death is approximately a result of combat, it's 100% off the tax bill.
And what about those who are in the same position as these National Guardists who are away from their families, struggling, who might take a hit on their income in order to be serving us in other countries?
Well, that's exactly what a reservist, the National Guardsman is, as opposed to active duty military. And under National Guard, there's an Army National Guard, an Air National Guard, and what have you, so there are different branches there, as well as reservists.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jonathan Barnes, Precinct 5. I think I know the answer to this, but just to be clear, once that level of abatement is established, I'm assuming it's applied equally to everyone who applies and is determined eligible. Is that correct? In other words, it's not individual based on the individual member.
No, it's the criteria I've established in other communities is how much time served during a particular fiscal year, and if it carries over to another fiscal year, we'll have them file for that year. Same methodology. It's not income-based, it's not who you are, it's time in service, time away, called up on active duty.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Sasso.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. Just curious, you said you've done this in other communities. I know obviously it's tough to prospectively project what the impact would be. Do you have some information or that you can share in terms of what your experience has been in the other?
I've granted 3 in Wakefield.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Further discussion? None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries.
Hey, I'm comfortable. Do you want me to do the next one too? Sure.
Board of Health?
Business under Article 11, the Board of Health. I'm not sure who is making the presentation.
The chair.
Oh, okay.
Good evening. My name is Rick Lopez. I'm the chair of the Board of Health here in Reading, and I'm here tonight to ask you to vote in favor of Article 11, which directs the Select Board to appeal to the state legislature for a special act petition to change the town charter to enable the Board of Health to have 5 full voting members instead of the current 3 voting members. You might ask, why is this necessary? Never happened before. It really has to do with 2 Massachusetts laws. First is Massachusetts Law, Chapter 111, which directs towns to create a three-member Board of Health. And our town charter has that as well. The second law is the open meeting law, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, that regulates appropriate legal behavior for local and state public bodies and to ensure transparency in government. So this law says whenever there is a deliberation between a quorum of a public body, and deliberation could include a phone conversation, an email, a text exchange, a personal conversation, then that deliberation must be declared a meeting, posted 48 hours in advance, have minutes taken. So it's really at the intersection of these two laws that the board has had issues that have arisen in its efficient and collaborative work. And this may not have been apparent before, but certainly during the COVID pandemic, when the board needed to be very active, frequently meeting, frequently communicating, interacting with other elements in the town, it became a real problem to try to limit all conversation at just to board meetings. So I would see, and the Board of Health certainly is strongly supportive of this, I would see that there would be three positive outcomes from this article. First would be better collaboration between the board and town processes. So currently, if there's a task force committee that Board of Health members should be participating and attending, we're limited to one board member because two board members would suddenly make it a Board of Health meeting requiring a posting and minutes and so forth. So it really stymies our ability to participate effectively in the town processes. The second is that a five-member board would promote better communication between board members. And for this same quorum issue, where there can't be any communication of any type outside of a board meeting, it really reduces the efficiency of the board. So offline board member communications such as simple feedback, inquiries, exploration of topics, clarifications, and so forth, all have to be discussed at a board meeting or have to be routed through the health director in a very awkward way. So the intent here is not to do business behind closed doors, but really to facilitate good decision-making at the board meetings. And then finally, an expanded board would enhance expertise available to the board and improve volunteer engagement. Having five members would, in addition to the current two associate members, would expand the expertise available to the board with qualified volunteers. And I think this would help with recruitment. And, I personally have seen in the past year one very qualified candidate not be able to have a position on the board simply because of the limited number of the current board structure. So other towns have seen the value of five-member boards and have increased Board of Health membership, and they include Needham, Bedford, Plymouth, North Andover, Framingham. I've had conversations with the chair in Winchester, who is thinking about doing the same thing. In addition, this town meeting in April voted unanimously on an instructional motion that supported a five-member Board of Health. So on behalf of the Board of Health, I'd ask you to endorse Article 11 and appreciate your support. Are there any questions?
First, we'll get a bylaw committee report.
At our meeting on October 11th, 2022, the Bylaw Committee voted 5-0 to recommend the content of this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Business under Article 12, Mr. Brown.
Good evening. As you read in the background of this, we've had this no dogs allowed as far as back as 1987, just after the charter was adopted, and town meeting voted it then. They also voted in favor of it in 2004. As we stated in the background, unfortunately, we have to have this. We'd like to have this because we have people that don't tend to their dogs and don't pick up after the dogs. And I will tell you, the boys in the cemetery don't like it when they have to step on it. I don't like it when I have to put out the markers every year for the veterans. Like everything else, it's a few inconsiderate people that make it necessary to have this. Presently, we do not have the ability to do anything, even though it's on the books. So this would allow us to at least have some recourse. Thank you.
Bylaw Committee report. Mr. Struble.
At our meeting of October 11th, the Bylaw Committee voted to recommend the content of this article to town meeting.
Okay, what was the vote? What was the vote?
By a vote of 5-0.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, Ms. O'Neill.
Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. I'm strongly opposed to this article. I was a little shocked to see the amount of fines that could potentially be placed on someone. Doesn't even take into account a warning. It's very punitive. We have other things in town that are much more serious that people get a warning first. So I think this is verging on ridiculous. I also walk around Laurel Hill Cemetery a lot, the entire perimeter. And when I was in there last month, there was goose droppings everywhere. Yeah. They had littered every single pathway in that cemetery. We're not going to fine or do anything dangerous to the geese. And I have never seen any dog leavings in Laurel Hill when I've been there. I'm not in the other cemetery, so I don't know, but this seems an overreaction. Thank you.
May I respond?
Mr. Brown?
Yes. I'm acting, this is coming from the foreman and the supervisor of the cemetery. I personally, prior to the pandemic, visited each and every cemetery on Sunday morning. There's a house up on Bachelor Road. It had a hole in the fence. The gentleman deliberately brought his animals over the cemetery and let them run all over the place. We patched the hole up. He put them in his car, drove them around. I've seen him at Charles Lawn, just letting them go. We cannot do anything about the geese. There's also at Wood End, I've been told that the turkeys have been messing up the place up there too. Happy Thanksgiving. Anybody who wants a free turkey. But this is also a health situation for the guys to have to pick it up. Each and every basket that's in the cemetery has to be separated. Plastic, dirt, pots have to be separated. And I don't want those guys have to put their hands into this stuff. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. O'Neill?
Thank you, Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. Just as a follow-up, we have a leash law in town. We have a pooper scooper bylaw in town. The pooper scooper bylaw can be used, but we should start with education first and then implement the pooper scooper bylaw first. And if that's a bylaw, we can already fine people for doing that. I think, again, this is just too much for too little. Thank you.
I'd like to repeat, this will bring it under that bylaw. Presently, we do not have any ability to fine anybody, even though it's on our books. And unfortunately, again, it's only a few people.
Yes, over here on the
Hi, Rebecca Bailey, Precinct 1. I live right next to Forest Glen Cemetery. And I think we used to have a dog. I don't any longer. But when we had one, we did walk him in there on a leash always. We always picked up after him. What my concern is with this is that on Forest Glen, there are no sidewalks. On Pearl Street, there are no sidewalks. On Wakefield Street, there are no sidewalks. People who live in my neighborhood, the safest place to walk their dog is the cemetery. Like, I would hate to see people fined for walking their dog on leash in the cemetery because they're choosing the safest option in my neighborhood. I don't object to fining people for letting their dogs off the leash or not picking up after them if they were caught doing those things, but a blanket fine for being in the cemetery with a dog seems excessive, especially with the safety concerns in my neighborhood. Thanks.
Further discussion? Yes, in the back.
Sure. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. Yes.
Phil Dardino, Precinct 3. Having no dogs in that facility seems extreme, but at least it should say, it should allow for service dogs. People should not be denied a chance to go to the cemetery if they have a service dog. So I'd like to make a motion that it says no dog except leashed service dogs.
Before I accept that, I think the town council would like to comment. Oh,
Sure. Yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
Ms. Freed.
By federal law, we have to allow them.
Thank you. I apologize because the website is down, so I can't cite to the specific provision, but the bylaw does not apply to service dogs. This bylaw is being inserted into the leash law section of your general bylaws, which does not apply to service dogs. There's a general exclusion.
Why can't this particular provision be limited?
This particular you could add it here, but it's unnecessary because where it is being inserted in the general bylaw, that section doesn't apply to service dogs. And I apologize, the town website is down, so I can't cite to the specific provision.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, right by the microphone, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, before that, I think Mr. Maltese, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I wanted to share is that, I want to reassure town meeting members that we don't actively pursue fines to anyone on any issue unless there is a repeat offense, if you will, right? We actually share our animal control officer with Wakefield. It's part of a regional effort. So we don't have a full-time animal control officer who is going to be here in Reading full-time. So just to reassure town meeting members that it is not our practice or policy to overly enforce any fines of any kind.
I'm going to call on this woman here, and I will call on the one in the back next, okay? So you have the floor.
Mary Parr, Precinct 5. I have a dog and live near Laurel Hill and I can't imagine. I walk around it, I lean over the fence, and I use the barrel there. I would never, I don't think unleashed animals belong in any part of town, but I've yearned to be able to walk through that beautiful cemetery, which is town property, with my leash dog and my poop bags. I think, I'm still walking, and it's so beautiful. I'm seeing a lot of Reading that I never saw when I lived and had 4 kids to truck around, but I would love to walk into the cemetery on the paths with my leashed dog and my poop bags. I think unleashed dogs don't belong there. I'm a little sick of inconsiderate people who are downtown sidewalks when I see poop left on the sidewalk, or people who leave bags, on my doorstep, effectively, for me to pick up and take in. but I'm against this motion.
I saw a hand up in the back, yes.
Alicia Williams, Precinct 8. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a quick question of clarification. My understanding is we already have signs on the cemeteries that say no dogs allowed. Do we just not have a fine?
We can't enforce it.
Okay, so how is this going to be enforceable?
This because it falls under the bylaw, it can be enforced. Right now, we have no provision to enforce it.
So does this need to be put under another bylaw to be enforceable?
That's the reason we're putting it under another bylaw, to be enforced.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let town council explain it.
Ms. Freed?
Thank you. So this section is being inserted into the leash law section, which is enforced by the animal control officer. And under General Law, Chapter 40, Section 21D, if anyone violates a provision of your bylaw, you can fine them, provided you have specific fines outlined in your bylaw, which we do for violations of this section. So while the cemetery commissioners have the authority pursuant to their regulations to put up signs that say no dogs in our cemeteries, they don't have the ability to enforce that through a fining mechanism, which is what they would have through the bylaw adoption if it was to pass tonight.
Okay, and just one more point of clarification. The service dogs got brought up. I just want to say, because it's public property, service dogs are allowed on public property, so it's kind of a non-issue. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes. Mr. Bonazzoli?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. James Bonazzoli, Precinct 6. I am in favor of this motion. It does put into our existing leash law, which we all agreed to, and that's what the Cemetery Committee is asking for, is the support to put it into an existing bylaw. Our cemeteries are beautiful and are nice to walk because of the crew that keeps them going. It's the crew that has asked us to put this bylaw in, so I'm in favor of this motion.
Ms. Lestrade?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Cheryl Lestrade, Precinct 5. I believe we already have stated that we have a leash law. I believe we've already stated that we share the animal control person with another town. So if we are looking to enforce this, which means that we're going to have to find someone who's going to take this on full-time, which means it's going to create a full-time job, and then that person is going to need to be paid for a law that we already have that's not enforceable. And unless you catch somebody in the act of doing something, you can't enforce it on he say, she say. And we have a leash law, and people aren't supposed to have their dogs unleashed anywhere in town. And I see them in the parks where children are playing. I see them out everywhere else. So are we going to now put this into effect and then not be able to police it, so then it will still be irrelevant? I'm not in favor. I'm opposed to this.
Yes, right here.
Brendan Gray, Precinct 6. National cemeteries, Arlington I'm very familiar with, I was a career military. No national cemetery allows you to walk your dog, leash or unleashed. And the reason for that is it's explicit. It's out of respect for those who've died. And matter of fact, it's not limited to national cemeteries. Most cemeteries in the country, I just did a quick Google search, most cemeteries in the country do not allow dogs to be walked there solely out of respect for those who are buried there. Thank you. So I do not support, I do support this.
Thank you.
Ms. Snow, Doctor?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. I actually would like to, I'm hearing the need to have a bylaw to be able to enforce keeping control in order to keep the cemeteries clean. I respect the last person, but I don't actually agree because I don't believe that dogs are necessarily disrespectful or owners who keep them in control and clean up after them are disrespectful. But I'd like to suggest an amendment, and I know we have a leash law, but if we need it within this bylaw to say every dog must be on leash when on the grounds, and then the rest of the motion, when on the grounds of Charles Lawn, Forest Glen, Laurel Hill, or Wood End Cemetery. The change being that it's not no dogs, but it's every dog must be on a leash. Thank you.
Sorry, we can't reference our current bylaw, but we are almost sure that the overarching bylaw where this will sit already has that. So it's a redundant is what we're trying to say.
Avery. No, but I can email it to you.
Oh. We're going to have a workaround. We're going to email the bylaw. Oh, I think we might have one right here.
On my computer right now.
Do we have?
I believe this is what you're looking for. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have it?
All right. Yes, I do.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So section 8.8.3.2 says that when not on private property of its owner or keeper, or on private property with the express permission of the property owner, a dog shall be on leash, provided, however, that it may be under effective voice control when within the town forest or on conservation lands, if allowed by the Conservation Commission's rules. Here, the property is in the care, custody, and control of the Cemetery Commission, so the leash law would apply, and if a dog was found off leash within the cemeteries, the animal control officer could enforce and issue a ticket under section 8832. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. If you need it again, let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, right here. Ms. Lestrade? Oh, then we'll get back to you.
Still Cheryl Lestrade, Precinct 5. I'm still asking, if we share an employee with Wakefield, and the person is, let's just say the animal control person is on a job in Wakefield, how are we going to hold that person accountable who has their dog at the cemetery unleashed? What kind of resources are we going to have to extend to really pursue and enforce this leash law in the cemetery? How much effort are we going to take on? How much is that going to cost us as a town? And is another position going to have to be created that's going to be more full-time? I mean, we have lots of police officers that have to do other things. We have a parking officer. We share an animal control officer with another town. Each of these people have jobs, so is another full-time position going to have to be created for this?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you. Town meeting approves the budget annually, right? So the before you is not a request for additional cost or headcount. I'll say that. The Reading, I want to say 2 years ago, had an employee who was half-time animal control officer and half-time parking enforcement officer. That the select board made a policy decision essentially to regionalize those services for efficiency, for a slew of reasons. We do not see a need to request any additional headcount or funds from town meeting at this time.
At this time. You said it correct, at this time. But if it does mean, we have a parking person now who has been extended from part-time to full in order to do the job that he or she gets paid to do. So now that person who had a split position before now has a full position already. So they can't take on now another task of policing the cemetery for unleashed dogs. So eventually, it is going to end up costing the town. Excuse me?
Was there a point of order? I'm sorry, you have to come to the microphone. We can't understand you.
David Panett, Precinct 1, and my point of order is this is not what is before us. And I cannot believe the amount of time that we have spent during town meeting on dog poop, okay? All cemeteries in the town of Reading currently have signs that say, no dogs allowed, period. I own 2 dogs.
Excuse me, Mr. Panett, you've gone beyond your point of order. You've taken the floor. I believe this is part of the debate because she was asking about potential costs for passing this. So I do believe she was in order.
I don't agree.
Any further discussion? Yes, Ms. Binder.
Angela Binder, Precinct 5. We already have a restriction on it, so I understand the desire to be able to enforce it. I have a question, though, because Ms. O'Neill brought up an important point, and also Ms. Bailey, about if there's no sidewalk and you're just cutting through because it's safer because you're on a street. Is there any way to lower the fine for the first offense? Or is that part of the existing law that wouldn't be able to be changed?
Mr. Maltese?
The fines are governed by the larger bylaw, and it's not this.
So because that part is already written, that couldn't be adjusted?
Well, I can answer that. It's not part of the motion.
It's not part of the motion,
right.
so that can't be, so we can't.
Right.
Oh, but,
It's not part of the article, actually. Yeah.
It's not part of the article,
Yes.
okay. And just for an idea, how often does an animal control officer actually give out a fine?
I do not have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, on the aisle.
Hi, Gena Pilowski, Precinct 7. So to me, it seems that a big portion of this discussion is centered around poop. So I would like to make an amendment such that the dog owners that are walking around without poop bags and or straying from the path are the ones that are fined.
Before I accept that, Ms. Freed?
So the current bylaw, section 883, deals with, 8833 deals with dog litter and requires owners to expeditiously remove any dog waste. So that is a finable offense under your existing bylaw.
Thank you. It seems like that's what we should be really focused on enforcing. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes. Oh, excuse me. Before we get to that, Mr. Brown,
Thank
comment?
We have a woman close to the Lower Hill Cemetery. Every day she comes in there. She's visiting her husband, that's fine. But she brings a dog, the dog is loose. Every day, somebody in the cemetery has to remind her that no dogs are allowed. And this is one of the reasons. Again, Wood End Cemetery, the same thing. The gentleman brings his car around, puts his dogs on a leash, and perhaps I'm a little selfish, but that's going to be my future home, and I don't want anybody doing that on me. Thank you.
And it was, yes.
Hi, Carrie Perry, Precinct 6. I'm also on the bylaw committee, so there was quite a lot of discussion around this topic, and I think we've heard a few things tonight. We've heard about how typically there's warnings given before there's really any fine that's given. So I think, we also have the leash law, we also have, the poop pickup law. This only reflects the sign that's already there. We also discussed that if people had a service happening where a family member wanted to bring a dog to a service, there would be the ability to gain permission to do that. So I think, respectfully, if there was a need for a pet to be in the cemetery to console a loved one during a service or something like that, there would be an option for that. I think this is just really caring for the cleanliness of our cemetery and also just reinforcing the sign that's already there that doesn't allow dogs. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. If you read our bylaws, our rules and regulations, theoretically, every time we have a Memorial Day services, you're standing on somebody else's graves, and that's forbidden. So we're not villains. We just want the ability to tell those people that are habitual people, please pick up. And we want the ability to be able to do that. And talking to town council, the men in the cemetery will be able to take a picture, and that's evidence enough, as I understand it, to take that person to court. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes. Before anybody who hasn't spoken yet, Mr. Wise?
I don't know why this is over here. Tom Wise, Precinct 4. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherilla, I was actually thinking about your exact point, and I was concerned about that. And then I started thinking about how is traffic enforcement really done? Just so happens there's like a speedway going down my side street, and the police aren't have a chance to be there. But when neighbors say, "Hey, here's a problem," the police can show up and enforce those things, right? So the same thing Mr. Brown is talking about. If somebody were to say, "Hey, here's a problem," the animal control officer could be there to observe it at that point in time and enforce it at that point in time. So this really comes down to what the sign says now and putting a bylaw in to support the sign saying now and giving the enforcement officer the ability to enforce appropriately.
Further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, right here.
Joe Carnahan, Precinct 6. I'd like to move the question.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. We have a motion to end debate. Do I have my counters from the other night? Mr. Sasso, could I ask you to do the honors for your section and the Finance Committee? Mr. O'Neill, are you available? Yes. Mr. Struble? And I think we lost Ms. Hillary. Ms. Bender, would you take the honors for? Thank you. And as well as the Select Board. All right, all those in favor of ending debate, well, there's a few people from the back that need to come in first. Okay, all those in favor of ending debate, please rise. Yes.
$24.
24.
39.
39.
26.
26. 31. And now those opposed, please rise. 20.
Never move the question.
3.
3.
1.
1.
4.
4. Are we missing one?
Nope, none.
Oh, none, okay. All right, the vote being 120 in the affirmative, 8 in the negative, the question has been moved, debate is ended. We will now go directly to a vote on the motion under Article 12. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, business under Article 13. Let's see, who are we having? Mr. Maltese?
Thank you very much. This is another home rule petition. As shown on the screen, any member of our public safety departments, police and fire, have a mandatory retirement date of 65 years old. What we are requesting tonight is to allow the select board to submit a home rule petition to grant our assistant fire chief 1 more year of employment. As you can imagine, being an assistant fire chief is not a very physically demanding job. It is very much an administrative position, and we feel strongly that having the knowledge of our assistant fire chief for 1 more year is the right decision for the town. Just 2 points of clarification. We are requesting for 1 additional year and nothing further. From a retirement standpoint, from a pension standpoint, the assistant fire chief would not be getting any additional benefits for the time served. So his pension benefits would be frozen, essentially, as though he had retired at 65. Thank you.
Chief Burns, did you want to make a comment? Yes, Mr. Burns, Chief Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Assistant Chief Tony Del Signore has been in the position since January 10th, 2022. So this will just give him 1 additional year if town meeting votes to approve this, and it also has to go to the state legislature for approval as well. But we still have to move forward with his replacement. We'll be looking to do that, probably in consultation with the town manager, who's the appointing authority. We'll probably be doing that in October of next year. So it's a pretty brief stay for him if this is granted. I do support the assistant chief staying for an additional year. I wouldn't support an additional year. I will not be asking for an additional year for myself. But Tony is in good physical shape. He's been doing a very fine job for us, and he's just gotten up to speed. And it will assist us when we do a changeover to his replacement. Thank you.
Bylaw Committee report, Mr. Struble.
By a vote of 5-0, the Bylaw Committee voted to recommend the content of this article to town meeting at our meeting on October 11th.
Thank you. Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 14. Mr. Percival or Mr. Maltese?
Actually, we were not expecting to move this fast, actually, which is amazing, but the staff that were presenting 14, 15, and 16 are not here. I would request to move to Article 17, Moderator.
Okay, but the way we would work this is we would move to lay each of these on the table so we can come back to them the next meeting. So we have a motion to lay the substance of Article 14 on the table. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. It is laid on the table. The same goes for the substance of Article 15. We have a motion to lay it on the table. Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? It's laid on the table. Make sure I don't go too far here. 16 as well. The substance of Article 16 is a motion to lay it on the table. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. And we are now up to Article 17. Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. Before you today should be simple. We were foreseeing that a project that was initially funded in 2021 was going to come over budget. Luckily, we are going to be able to do that project with the amount that has been already approved. So the request is to indefinitely postpone Article 17.
Okay. Is FinCom report, do you have one, or, yeah, okay, since it's been postponed. Is there any, Ms. Perry, do you have a, oh, okay, we have a motion to indefinitely postpone. Is there any further discussion on that? Mr. Sasso?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. I do understand, I believe, what happened with this particular article and the situation regarding the postponement of the project. I do just want to raise this point in general from a town meeting perspective. Our experience in the past has been like in this case where we've approved funding for a project and then it hasn't been executed, and then people come back and, I mean, this happened with the water tower where, that was approved by town meeting, and lo and behold, another year or two later came back and we ended up getting additional bills on that. So I just want to raise it as a point that in the future, these types of postponements, in this case, it obviously it seems to have worked out, but in our experience thus far, that has not been a very positive experience. So thank you very much.
Any further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ross? Oh, you do have a FinCom report. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On our meeting on October 19th, FinCom voted 8-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Okay, we are speaking of indefinite postponement. Is there any further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of indefinite postponement, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And it carries. It has been indefinitely postponed. All right. Article 18, Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. So the article that is under 18 has two portions. The first one is to amend pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, 5B, the purpose of the Smart Growth Stabilization Fund, so that the fund may hold all payments received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under Chapter 40R, including incentive and density bonus payments. So just a little background. When the 40R district was created in the downtown, there was a requirement essentially to place the incentive payments from the state in a separate fund. So between 2008 and 2015, the town of Reading has received $503,000 from the state as incentive payments for the construction that has happened in the downtown. Since then, this is the second payment that we received now. The second payment is for $414,000, and it is currently sitting in free cash. However, it cannot be commingled with free cash because of the restrictions on what the funds can be used for. So the Commonwealth requires all incentives, incentive payments to be used for capital projects only. So it cannot be used for operating funds. Therefore, leaving it in free cash is problematic. We are not asking town meeting to spend the funds. What we are asking for is to move these funds from free cash into the fund. When the time comes that we come to town meeting for a request to spend it, that will require a 2/3 vote of town meeting.
Before we continue, I just want to make clear, Are there two separate motions on this, or is it all one motion?
There's one motion.
One motion, okay.
One motion, two parts.
Okay, thank you. FinCom report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At our October 19th meeting, FinCom voted 8-0 to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. O'Neill.
John O'Neill, Precinct 6. Just a question. The first payment, I think you said like $503,000, was that expended or is that still in the account?
That is still in the account.
And for what purposes can it be used? I know you said capital, but capital related to downtown or any capital expenditure?
It could be used for any capital expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. So if we move this money in, there'll be close to $1 million in the stabilization fund. Is there a process for, public discussion or on what we can use that money for? $1 million is a lot of money. We could do a lot of things with it, especially if we reinvest it in the downtown area where, those projects are. I mean, I know that, we haven't had any public meetings on it, but just, Fidel, what are your thoughts on this? As the board discussed this, could we acquire property? Could we buy property, make it into a park? I mean, there's all these things that have come up during the prior zoning discussions about what we can do. We can use it maybe for, purchasing that building that Article 19 postponed. I mean, is there thought, what's the current thinking? Because that's a lot of money, and I hate to have it being sit there, kind of similarly like the Housing Trust Fund, where it's just sitting there and no one's really thought about it. So I guess my question is, have you guys thought about it?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you. We have talked about it. I don't know that we have come with a recommendation, and I don't think that it's been discussed, a plan has been discussed in depth. I will say that in order to move this money, the select board must put this as a future article on town meeting, and it requires a 2/3 approval of town meeting.
Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready? This requires a 2/3 vote. Are we ready for the vote? I could ask my tellers if they are available. All right, all those in favor, please rise.
Twenty-four.
24.
38.
38. 32.
28.
28. And those opposed, please rise.
This time.
1.
1.
0.
0.
0.
0.
One.
1. The vote being 122 in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, the motion carries. Business under Article 20. 19 we already did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've already done 19. We definitely postponed that the other evening. Article 20, the Climate Advisory Committee. Who we have? Okay. Excuse me, just one second.
Hi, folks.
Can I hold on for just 1 second? I just want to ask Mr. Bocci. So yours would come after the main motion. So you would be like a subsidiary motion. That's how it works. Yeah. Yeah. If it were made, motion being made, that would be first. Okay. I have your. I'm sorry about that. Continue.
Hi, Gennady Pilowski, Precinct 7, also with the Reading Climate Advisory Committee. So David Zeke has spent some time to prepare a presentation for us. Unfortunately, he had to be out today due to a family emergency. So I'm asking that we move to postpone this article until Monday.
Oh, okay, so you're asking to lay this on the table? Okay. Is there a second to lay this on the table? Okay. All those in favor of laying the substance of Article 20 on the table, please raise your hand. And those opposed? The motion carries. It is laid on the table.
Thank you.
Article 21, Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. We were hoping for John Parsons to be here, but I don't think he's. Oh, is he walking in? Oh, there he is. So Article 21 is a gift. It is for town meeting to allow the creation of the Laura S. Parsons Fund. It is a gift from the Parsons family in the amount of $10,000. The principal balance of the gift will be preserved, and the interest is made available to the Council on Aging for expenses, programming, and other things as they see fit. It would be very similar to all the other funds we have, and would be administered by the commissioners of trust funds.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Yes. Mr. Doxer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting members, Mark Doxer, Precinct 1, Chair of the Select Board. I just want to rise in support of this article. John Parsons has been very involved in the community and the Council on Aging. He's been trying to make a donation to the town for more than several months at this point, and I urge you to support this. Thank you.
Further discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Mr. Article 22, Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. We wish to make a motion to indefinitely postpone Article 22 to a later special town meeting.
Okay, Mr. Doxer moves that we lay the indefinitely postpone the substance of Article 22. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? None appearing. All those in favor of indefinite postponement, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the article is indefinitely postponed. Article 23. Ms. Parr? Is Ms. Parr here, Mr.? Oh, okay.
Article 23 is a citizen's petition. I have lived in the town a long time. I think those of us who have gone downtown realize that the town DPW does a great job. It clears the sidewalks as much as it can, especially where there are benches and street trees and signs and all sorts of other obstacles, which leaves about 2 inches or so of snow on the sidewalks. And with weather being the way it is, the snow gets rained on and turns to ice, and responsible owners have come and shoveled cleared their sidewalks very nicely, but there are people that have not bothered, that being places like CVS and even the owners, the builder of the property I live in, being the postmark. So I move that the town vote to require that owners of all commercial buildings and the owners of residences having 3 or more units and owners of parking lots in the downtown walking district shovel public sidewalks down to the hard pavement and prevent or remove icy conditions in the entire width of the sidewalk by 9 in the morning after any snowstorm.
Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Brown, Precinct 8. I believe this violates the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution in the fact that it makes you an indentured servant. Unless you've been convicted by a court of law to shovel that sidewalk, you are violating Article 13. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Ms. Binder? I'm sorry, did Ms. Freed? Oh, okay, before we, Ms. Freed has a comment before we get back to Ms. Binder. Ms. Freed, did you? Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking. Yeah, okay, great.
So I'm not going to speak to whether it violates the U.S. Constitution. It's a really interesting argument, Mr. Bowers. But the Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 21, Subpart 3, says that you can require property owners to shovel the walkway, but that you have to do it through the adoption of an ordinance or a bylaw. So I don't believe that if town meeting votes in support of this article, it would have any legal effect to actually require property owners to shovel.
Ms. Binder?
Angela Binder, Precinct 5. A person in my precinct spoke to me about this, an elderly person who talked about this as an equity issue. She said that, you know, for some people, it might be an inconvenience to walk through snow, walk on icy patch. But for some elderly people, people who have mobility issues, people who need assistance, that it really comes down to an equity issue more so than just a convenience issue. So I'm going to support this.
I think having last winter watched a neighbor who is in a wheelchair, who has an electric wheelchair, have to go into Haven Street because there were sidewalks were blocked. I think it's a safety issue too.
Further discussion? Ms. Herrick?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Karen Herrick, Precinct 8 and Vice Chair of the Reading Select Board. So I can appreciate the dangers of the sidewalks, and I do understand and concur that our DPW cannot get it down to hard pavement. So the question I had, and as you heard town council say, even if we vote in support of this, it may not be enforceable. It may need to come back before this body in another form, perhaps, and through the bylaw committee. But I might ask about the downtown walking district. I don't know that we have an official downtown walking district. And I might, as a friendly amendment, suggest that that be an area that could be further defined. Even saying the 40R zone would be a little more specific than the downtown walking district, although I can kind of, but we wouldn't know where it would end.
Exactly. I tried to get that information. I meant the 40R area. That's where there are many new housing units.
To propose an amendment, we'd need the exact location on the thing we're
Right.
in.
So if you wanted to make an amendment to this, you could substitute the downtown smart growth district. Instead of the downtown walking district, you could change it to the downtown smart growth district. Would you like to do that?
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, is there any objection to making that part of her main motion? If not, we will accept that as your main motion, so we won't vote on a separate amendment. Okay, further discussion on the, there was somebody over here? I will get right back to you, but there was someone over here I missed? No? Okay, Ms. Downing?
Mary Ann Downing, Precinct 3. I think we need to better define public sidewalks. I mean, what public sidewalks? Does someone have to shovel all of them? Just the ones adjacent to their unit? I'm unclear about that. And also I'm concerned with by 9 o'clock after any snowstorm, sometimes snowstorms are continuous off and on. Is it the last snowstorm? But I'm more concerned about defining what public sidewalks, because it implies like they have to shovel it could be all the public sidewalks, it could be just the ones there. Can you clarify? Thank you. I don't really have an amendment because I don't know what your intent was.
Ms. Parr?
Okay, public sidewalks, I think public sidewalks are the sidewalks the town put in front of the sidewalk in front of and adjacent to the property, the builders or the owner's property. That would probably include town hall. I think we're all the owners there. And since walking in that area, I've found sometimes it's pretty slippery.
Okay, I have a down here at the end.
Jeffrey Coram, Precinct 7. I'm in support of the concept behind this. I am concerned, as we've heard before. I mean, like the section of public sidewalk, for example, I'm thinking in front of CVS, it's a very narrow sidewalk before the parking lot, but then a little bit further down, I'm not exactly sure which business, there's sort of a parkette section there that would be very difficult to shovel, would be much larger section. I'm also concerned that it's requiring the owners to do the shoveling as
Owners
opposed
of the
to
building.
the owners maybe contracting out to, I mean, as written here, it says the owners actually have to do the shoveling. And I think, as the town council mentioned, we probably do need to see this in a bylaw in order for it to be enforced with some sort of a fine if the business owners do not, comply with it. So I guess I'm not going to support this as written, but we may see some amendments that would make it supportable. Thank you.
Mr. Struble?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Struble, Precinct 7, and the Chair of the Bylaw Committee. You're evidencing what I would say the beginnings of a bylaw committee that would first receive this for consideration. You're actually looking at all the wheres and whys and wherefores, which is why I think it would be very nice if the mover would bring this to the bylaw committee and ask us to craft a bylaw and give it the force of an ordinance or a bylaw, which the state law requires. It's kind of formless right now. It doesn't have any body. But it's just a statement. They shall do it, but there's no enforcement behind it. A bylaw would do that, and I think the bylaw committee is the perfect vehicle to craft this for town meetings consideration. So go ahead and play bylaw committee tonight if you want to, but I think it's probably should be voted down and brought to the bylaw committee so we can bring it back in a very enforceable form, which that's our job. So that's a suggestion, but I'm going to vote against this myself. Thank you.
Mr. Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. Just to follow up from Town Council, who said that no matter what we would vote here right now, it would be unenforceable. So I would maybe perhaps encourage the maker to withdraw this motion and instead make an instructional motion that asks the bylaw committee to do just exactly what this is. So then it can come back here and we can actually vote on something that has some enforcement and has some more thought and, sort of that's cooked a little bit more. So I don't know if the maker would withdraw that and then make it as instructional motion that we can then all vote on at the end of town meeting, and then go forward from there.
Instructional motion deadline has passed, so it's too late for that, but every other point you've made is fine. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stephen Cool, Precinct 6. I see some practical impracticalities here, and one is that we're not supposed to shovel snow into the roadway. So where would someone put all the snow that would go the entire width of the sidewalk? Where are they supposed to put it? And I think of the person who owns the trophy store down by CVS. And are they supposed to come in on a Sunday morning when they're not going to be open and clear that sidewalk from the front of the building to the curb? And again, where are they going to put the snow? I would think I would only support this if it covered, let's say, a navigable path down the sidewalk, and only on days when, well, let's say business days, Monday through Friday sort of, and perhaps Saturday, days when a business would be open. So I could propose that as an amendment, perhaps, to this motion.
What is your
order?
well, if you have some exact wording, yes.
Sir?
If you have some exact wording for the amendment, it would be.
Well, where it says in the entire width of the sidewalk, I think we'd want to say along a path, along a navigable, or to form a navigable path down the sidewalk. To form a navigable path.
On the sidewalk, is that the way you want it?
And then at the end of it, at the end of the sentence, perhaps add on business days, or yeah, I'll leave it at that. See what town meeting thinks.
Okay, is there a second to that? Second, yes. Okay, so we are now. We now turn to the proposed amendment. Discussion on the proposed amendment. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes. Yes. Ms. Bruglacchio?
Hi, Sarah Bruglacchio, Precinct 4. I think that the onus of the snow removal should go back to the town. And I brought this up a couple of times, since I own a house that's on
We are
Green
discussing just the amendment right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'll get right back to you.
Okay.
Further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Brown?
I move to indefinitely postpone the whole article.
Okay, we have a motion to indefinitely, okay, we have definitely postponed, and we have a second. All right, we are now turning to discussion on the indefinite postponement. Is there further discussion on that? Ms. O'Neill?
Excuse me. Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. I'm going to vote against the motion to indefinitely postpone. I think that we should pass this one way or another, as we know it will go to the bylaw committee anyway, as an indication of support for the idea behind this. We know there's a lot of little tweaks or changes that it needs, so I would not vote to postpone it, and I would like us to vote on the article tonight and get it to bylaw committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on indefinite postponement? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? We have first vote on indefinite postponement. Then, if that carries, that's the end of the article. If it does not, we will go back to the amendment. So all those in favor of indefinite postponement, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. It is indefinitely postponed. All right. Is there any business we can conduct? Probably not. I would entertain a motion to adjourn until Monday evening. So moved. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of adjournment until Monday evening, please raise your hand. Those opposed, motion carries. This town meeting stands adjourned until Monday evening.